We know that the anxieties are really high with BDL. I want you to know that there's no manual, right? And so there's no like right way to do it. It's something that we're kind of like figuring out together. And so be sure to like give yourself grace. We're trying to think of things that can be useful for your classrooms. You might leave here and be like, hey, that might not work. But that's okay. This is just like a brainstorm session so that you can then take it and utilize it within your classroom. Leander and I would definitely recommend practicing with someone. Just for this lesson alone, we practiced for probably like an hour and a half and found out so many things. So, we can sit here and plan a lesson all day, but as you know, the practice of it is going to be a little bit different. So we do recommend, we know that this week is busy, but just if you have BDL kids in your room, it would be beneficial for you to. So we also we're telling you the basics and just how to get you started for day one. As the year goes on, we'll definitely be offering sessions on small groups and other things, but y'all don't do small groups the first 2 weeks of school anyway. You're getting to know your kids, setting expectations, so don't feel pressured to know how to do that right now either, okay? This is just basics, day one. Okay, so.
Just a sec.
Oh.
Let us know when you're ready.
Let us know when you're ready, Sherry. So in case, if you could put your phones off, that would be great, in case those are not off on the video. So just before we get started, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the basics of the technology and how we have it set up in the room. We do realize that every school is different and and they have different technology, but this is some of the basics to help get you started. So every teacher is going to have a laptop with a docking station. I want you to think about that this is your visual. This is what the kids are going to see. So when you are doing a Google Meet with them and you're presenting their screen, this is what they're going to present off of. Your Google Slides, your smart board, whatever you have. Because of that, your volume should be off and your sound and your mic should be muted. So this is your visual. The Chromebook is going to be your audio. This is what the kids are going to see. So they're going to be in the Google Meet here, watching you teach over here. I would recommend the space between you and the Chromebook matters. We're going to show you today the simulation of a BDL student. We have practice when I was over here teaching, and it's a little bit more difficult for the kids to hear. So we do recommend you kind of being closer. So for the Chromebook, sound is going to be on and you're going to be unmuted. So laptop, your visuals are going to be up, sound is going to be off. Chromebook is your audio, and your audio is going to be on and unmuted. Now we realize that every school doesn't have these podiums that go nice and high. When Leander and I were practicing, I had it down here and I was like, oh friend, this is not the best view. We need to elevate it a little bit. So we did put it up here. But there's probably some packs of paper or books or some things that you might not use in your room. You could stack those up to get it a little bit higher. It's just nicer to have it at eye level, so when you're interacting with both your traditional and BDL kids, it's easier for you to see instead of having to go down here all the time, okay? So those are just kind of the basics of how we have it set up. You're going to see how it works. We're going to simulate what a BDL lesson looks like so you get to see all of that, okay? So what the format of today is going to look like is, again, we're going to go over blended distance overview, what it is not within Berkeley County. We're going to take you through a first grade reading mini lesson. We're going to share with you some BDL resources. And then we're also going to have a little bit of a Q&A session, okay? So, what is blended distance learning? A lot of us, it looks a lot very different in all kind of counties. Today, we're really going to focus on what does blended distance learning look like within Berkeley County. So, to get us started, we are going to ask you to go into the Google Classroom. And if you click on the classwork tab here, and then you click on the reading, you're going to see here everything that you need for today's reading lesson. We have it broken down into 1, 2, 3, 4, so you know the steps of the order that it's going to come in today. This is something that you will need to decide for your classroom. For us, it is what was user-friendly and could take a kid through. But for example, the first thing we have is that Padlet activity. So if you click on that, our first activity for you guys today is what is blended distance learning and what is blended distance learning not. So take about a minute and just write a comment here. What do you think it is? What do you think it isn't? There isn't any wrong or right answers. We're all new to this. So you're going to get a minute now.
Mine says traffic jam.
Yeah.
Oh, refresh it if you can. Is the traffic jam over?
Okay, no worries. It's just crazy.
Might be thinking a minute. It's a funny way of saying it. So something that I want you to think about with this activity is when you are working on your lesson plans for both traditional and blended distance learning students, you want to think about technology applications that lend itself to both traditional and blended distance learning. So if you were to ask a question like compare and contrast two texts or tell me how they're the same or different, you don't need to write it on a board or write it on an anchor chart and then your blended distance learning kids do it on Padlet. They can both do it on Padlet, right? You get the same effect on both things. So you really want to think about what are some technology applications that you can utilize that lend itself to both traditional as well as blended distance learning students. Some things that people have said about what blended distance learning is that it's quality instruction for students to learn in an at-home setting. It's creative tech teaching, a combination of learning from watching the teacher through Google Meet and working on schoolwork independently on their Chromebooks. Some things that it's not is homeschooling, sending recorded lessons for students at home to watch, learning on your own time, unstructured. Those are great. There's a lot of great ideas there about what blended distance learning is and what it is not. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to watch a video by Dr. Wolf, who is our Chief Academic and Innovation Officer, and she's going to go into a little bit more detail about what blended distance learning is and is not within Berkeley County.
Hello, Berkeley County Educators. I'm Kelly Wolf, Chief Academic and Innovation Officer. We're excited to have you back for the 2021 school year. We know this year will look different in many ways. We're looking forward to seeing all the innovative things that you will be doing with your students in the coming months. This school year, we have the opportunity to redesign what education could look like. Today's demo sessions are a collaborative effort between academics and innovation and the Office of Technology. Each of you were surfers this past spring, experiencing both intense and easy waves of various sizes. Many of you rode the wave successfully and others fell off your board. But each and every day, no matter how rough, each teacher got back on their surfboard and surfed the wave. It was truly incredible to see all the amazing things both you and your students accomplished. As we move forward and ride the waves of 2021, let's capitalize upon these successes. The purpose of today's session is not to share a formula for blended distant learning, rather to provide an example of how a lesson could look for a class with both traditional and BDL students. Each pathway may have unique needs. As you plan and design instruction, you may want to consider where traditional and BDL strategies align and diverge. Let's examine some characteristics of BDL. BDL combines both synchronous and asynchronous learning. There will be times when the traditional face-to-face students are participating in synchronous learning with the BDL students from home. A variety of tools should be used to support both traditional and BDL students. These tools may vary for each group of learners. We want to build upon the digital collaboration we saw during the spring by extending opportunities for traditional and BDL students to connect. Teachers should continue to identify learning targets and differentiate instruction to meet the needs of all students, regardless of the pathway. As we approach the new school year serving students in multiple pathways, it is important to consider what BDL is not. We are committed to providing high-quality, engaging instruction for all learners, regardless of their pathway. The implementation of blended distant learning will be new for BCS teachers and students. Each teacher will continue to grow and learn throughout the year. Just like in the spring, there will be different waves to tackle each day. Often you will surf the waves successfully, but there will also be times that you might fall off your board. We are all learning from these successes and failing forward. These demo sessions are intended as a starting point or springboard for teachers. Just like the ocean, the possibilities are endless with blended distant learning, and we are excited to see what you and your students will achieve. Thank you for joining us today. We hope to provide you a peek into the classroom of both traditional and BDL students. Keep in mind that this is just one iteration. We know that you are already brainstorming ideas for the upcoming year based upon your experiences, and hope that you will take a few ones back with you today. Please take the opportunity at the end of today's session to submit questions through the provided Google form. Responses will be posted to the BDL website located on the intranet to help support all BCS teachers. We wish you the best for the upcoming year.
Alrighty. The next thing that we're going to do is a quick little check-in. So if you go back to your Google Classroom and you go to the classwork thing, that should be number 2. And you're going to click on that Google form and do that check-in. You're going to answer 2 questions. The first question that you're going to answer is, rate your comfort level with blended distance learning, or BDL. 1 being, I'm not that comfortable with it at all, and 5 being like, I'm a rock star, I'm ready for this. Your second question is, rate your comfort level with teaching blended distance learning students. Again, 1, not really ready for that, whereas 5, you're very, very comfortable. Something that we want you all to think about is, we wanted to do a check-in thinking about how we can connect with both traditional and blended distance learning students. One of your focuses each year is social emotional learning, and it's going to be even more of a focus this year since we haven't seen our students since March. And so it's important that just because students are at home learning doesn't mean that they don't have social emotional learning needs. And so you got to get creative about how you can check on kids and see how they're doing and what supports you can put in place for them. So an idea might just be a Google form to ask kids how they're doing. We put pictures on there because sometimes kids can identify with pictures better than with words. Because y'all know, you've got some kids that are be like, my mommy and daddy, they fought all night. And then you have kids that would never tell you what's going on at home, but they probably feel a little bit more comfortable putting it on a form. And that way you can really address the need and say, hey, Susie's having a really rough day. I need to make sure to check in with her and put some supports in place. So just an idea for you. Again, if you've worked with Google Forms before, it's really nice. It's quick, easy, formative data. You can see that we're kind of right now at a 2 to 3, hoping by May we're going to be at that 5. And again, our comfort level is at a 2 to 3, hoping to be a little bit more at that 5 by the end of the year.
These quick check-ins can also be used as a quick formative assessment as you address standards in your classroom. We tried to kind of mimic the Facetoface strategy a lot of teachers use in their classrooms. So how are you feeling about the standard we just taught? Facetoface, your comfortable level. So thinking about how you can also assess those students to then drive your instruction both at home and in the building.
Okay, the next part of the lesson is that we're going to take you through a reading mini lesson, and we're going to simulate what it's like to have both traditional and BDL students together for a lesson. So I need 4 of you guys to take all your stuff, take your computers and everything. We're going to go to the room next door, and we're going to practice being BDL students. You're going to get the same instruction that traditional students are, but you're just going to see it from that lens.
And as I prepare for my BDL learners to live stream into my classroom, I'm going to set up my Google Meets. So the first thing I'm going to do, like Jen mentioned earlier, The sound on my computer is off, my physical computer. I'm gonna join my Google Meet. I'm gonna join my Google Meet code that's produced within my Google Classroom. As I join this, I'm going to mute my mic, and I'm gonna turn my camera off, and I'm gonna join. Again, this is just for the visual aspect of the lesson. This is where I'm gonna share my screen, this is what they're gonna see. This computer is what they're going to hear. So I'm going to join the same Google Meet link again, but my sound on my Chromebook is on, so if they unmute their mics, I can hear what they're saying. And then my microphone is on so that they can hear me instruct. Then I'm going to share my screen. A few tips with sharing your screen. If you're planning on showing a video, the easiest way to share your screen is to share a Chrome tab. So that way you can toggle between the different tabs. That's the best way that the students can hear the audio and see the visual of the video. However, if you are planning on using your smartboard for the lesson, if you want kids to see what you are writing on your smartboard with the markers, you need to share your entire screen. So you kind of have to think about what is your purpose and what are your activities planned within the lesson in order to ensure that you're sharing it the correct way. I'm going to share it in just a Chrome tab because I'm going to be showing a video in a second, and I want to make sure that all students are able to hear that video. Alright guys, as y'all log in, remember your microphone should be off. Go ahead and mute your mics. We have created just some simple visuals that you can use with your BDL learners. A lot of people have said that they feel like it's helpful, so you can pair that visual with the verbal, especially since we are working with more elementary age students that sometimes need that additional support. Especially if you have a lot of kiddos logging on at the same time, they're all trying to chat and talk about their weekend and the pets that they have at home, that visual reminder is easy for them to understand. So I asked for them to mute all of their mics. Alright guys, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, yes. Thumbs down if you cannot. No. Everybody is a thumbs up, they can all hear me. Alright guys, thumbs up if you can hear me from here. Yep, everybody's a thumbs up. So when Jen said making sure that Chromebook is kind of in your vicinity of teaching, making sure you might just want to do a quick little mic check with your students, make sure they can hear you and they can hear you clearly. Before we move on, one thing that I wanted to show y'all is Google Meet in the school district has pushed out this nod extension to all students and all teachers. The great thing about it is students can raise their hand. So some of my blended distance learning students, if you can raise your hand via the nod extension so we can see what that looks like. Click on this little guy at the top raising his hand. So if you click on him, it says Leander raised their hand. It will show, this will pop up, and then the only way that it can go away is that I have to actually click it closed. So, if I'm teaching and I come to a point in instruction and I check on my BDL learners and I see that Renee has raised her hand, I can pause and answer her question. It also has these emojis that are optional that have thumbs up, thumbs down, clapping, hey, happy birthday, and laughing. Now, I can see that our students could probably get a little emoji happy during our lesson. So just like anything else, I would set expectations of when it's appropriate to use these and when it is not, because they will have access to them. So just kind of making that part of your routine and your structure of your classroom and setting those expectations for your kids before you get started. Another way that your students could ask questions before this was pushed out to kiddos, we just suggested writing a check mark in the, or question mark in the chat box so that we can have the chat up and I can monitor that, and as soon as they have a question, I can go over and I can address that. A lot of our younger age students probably won't be able to type their question in the chat box, but that simple question mark or whatever emoji or thing that y'all decide on as a class, being able to monitor that chat will be very important. Okay, so I'm going to switch back on over to our presentation. All right, guys. So today, before we get started with our lesson, we're going to go over our code of cooperation. So this is something you would typically do at the start of each of your lessons or at the start of each of your day. Is to go over your classroom rules and expectations. So for today, We need to remember, we're going to be kind to one another. We are going to be prepared for class, and we are going to respect and listen to our classmates. This is a visual that you typically have posted somewhere in your classroom in order to refer to and the students can refer to. We've also included it in our Google Classroom and we pinned it to the top of the page. So that's going to be the first thing that kiddos see when they log on each day as that visual reminder. In our expectations, we all have the same expectations, kiddos, but it's going to look a little bit different for those participating at home and those participating in the classroom. So, for those participating at home, remember, when Ms. McWigan is teaching, we have our microphones off, okay? Remember, we have our microphones off. For those in the classroom, we're using the appropriate voice level. So, for right now, that would be a voice level of 0, unless I ask you a question. Remember, everybody should be actively engaged in the instruction. For my kiddos at home, if you have a question, put a question mark in the chat box, or you can raise your hand using the nod extension. For my kiddos in class, can you show me what you'll do if you have a question? Yes, you're going to raise your hand. Great job, guys. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So today, we are going to be talking about comparing and contrasting text, okay? By the end of today, you should be able to say, I can compare and contrast elements. Remember, that means we can find things that are the same and find things that are different in books written by the author Kevin Henkes. You know, as we've gone through the last few weeks, we've read a lot of these books by Kevin Henkes, and these are some of the ones that we have read. Yesterday, we read Wimberly Worried. And when we read Wimberly Worried, we filled out this compare and contrast chart. We talked about who are the characters in the story. We talked about the setting of the story, where it takes place. And we also noted some things that we noticed as we read. So let's remember what we read yesterday. Today, we're going to read Chrysanthemum. This is another Kevin Henkes book, and I can already see some similarities to the book that we read yesterday. Has anybody ever heard of the word chrysanthemum before? In class, you would raise your hand. Kiddos at home, you can either raise your hand or use your nod extension. I want you to raise your hand if you've ever heard the word chrysanthemum before. Renee, you've heard the word chrysanthemum. Can you either unmute yourself or type in the chat box what you think chrysanthemum means?
Well, I raised my hand, but I forget.
Oh, okay, that's okay. I appreciate you volunteering and being actively engaged in instruction. If it comes to your mind, make sure to raise your hand again. Does anybody else in the class know what chrysanthemum means or have heard of it before? No? Well, we're going to find out. Can anybody use these clues in the picture to figure out what chrysanthemum could mean? Yes?
It's a flower.
It is a flower. Thank you so much for using those clues on our cover to determine what that means. Great job. So by looking at the front cover, you can you see any similarities between Wimberly Worried and Chrysanthemum? So this is when we would go into the lesson, we would read Chrysanthemum, and we would talk about we would compare and contrast the story elements. We're not going to read the story today. Most of you have already read Chrysanthemum, and you can probably go ahead and tell me all about it. But I do want to model kind of how you can do some of these read-alouds with your students, because that's such a huge component of the ELA block, is really reading to them and engaging in that text. So there are a few ways that you could do that. So first we have Epic. A lot of teachers use this on a typical basis. If you wanted to link to Epic for your kiddos to read this book, my screen is still presented. I could start reading. They can see the text at home. You can see the text in the building. And then I would just read aloud. They would be able to hear me like they can hear me right now through my instructions. So that is one option. Obviously, not all books are available on Epic, but that would be a great resource for you to check out. As you notice, as I toggle between tabs, I need to click Share this tab instead in order for it to pop up on their feed. Another option is a YouTube reading of Chrysanthemum. This is when you're going to have to switch some components with your technology. So this gets a little bit tricky, but you will become experts after you practice just a little bit. Before I pull this up, I'm going to have to switch my audio to my computer because that is how they're going to be listening to the story. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my sound off on my Chromebook, and I'm going to mute myself on my Chromebook so they can no longer hear or see me. What I'm going to do now is turn my sound on my Chromebook, or on my laptop, I'm sorry. and I am going to share this video.
The day she was
Can you
born
give me a
was
thumbs
the
up if you
happiest
can hear
day
it?
in her parents' lives. She's perfect, said her mother.
Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear it?
Absolutely, said her father. And she was. She was absolutely perfect.
So they're able to hear the audio there.
Her name must be
If you're
everything
watching it in a
she
school
is,
building,
said her
they're
mother.
able to hear it
Her
with
name
their audio.
must be absolutely perfect, said her father. And it was.
We're not going to listen to the whole story, but as I'm done with my story, I need to remember I need to turn the sound off on my computer. Make sure my mic is muted here. And flip back to turn my sound on and to unmute myself. Now give me a thumbs up if you can hear me again. Yes or no? Perfect. Yes, they can hear me. As you're flipping audio, I'll just check in with your kids again, make sure that they can hear you talking before you continue on with your lesson. So that is how you would kind of switch audio for a video. The ILCs have created an amazing video for technology device setup, and they go step by step what needs to be altered and changed when you are showing a video on your screen. So that will be a great resource when you get back to your classrooms to kind of practice with if you show videos frequently in your classroom. Next, we're going to, after we write chrysanthemum, we're now going to compare and contrast. We're going to talk about how they are the same and how they are different. We're going to continue to fill out our chart. Ooh, let's not restart. Okay, we have 15 minutes. Maybe we'll be in a short session by then. See if it will. Okay. Ignore this. We are going to then fill out our compare and contrast chart. We've already filled out what Wimberley Worry is. We're going to go in and type in chrysanthemum. So as a teacher, I can type it in via my laptop, or if I want my kiddos to see it and I want to, I'm going to have to switch computers, and I want them to be able to see what I write on the smartboard, I just need to share my entire screen, and then I'll be able to write on the smartboard and they'll be able to see. This is an activity you would typically do possibly on an anchor chart or on your board, so the kids would be able to refer back to. So thinking about what small shifts and tweaks you can make to your instruction so that both the BDL learners and the face-to-face learners are able to access it. When we were first practicing this original chart had a green background with pink and blue writing, and I know being elementary teachers, we can get so creative when it comes to colors. One of the kind of considerations that we'll ask for you to consider is as we were practicing, Jen, as our BDL student, was not able to read the text. So when you're preparing things like this, making sure that you have a clear background, clear text in order for them to be able to read it on their computer screen. Of course, you'll wrap up your lesson with who can share something that they learned today. What we really want you to kind of think about, it's very easy for me to direct my attention to y'all and ask y'all and engage y'all in questions, but we also need to be engaging our blended distance learners. So any kind of strategy you want to use in order to make sure that you're equally engaging both learners, whether that's even just simple popsicle sticks of pulling a name or a number, or you can use technology apps like Flippity, which is a random name generator that'll help you kind of remember to call both students. I know I need to be held accountable in order to remember that as a teacher. You can't see it right now because of this, but there's also some apps that you could use like Kahoot, Flipgrid, Screencastify, so you could get a response from everybody. They could record what they learned today. Then you would go into independent reading time, where your BDL students might log off and participate in some asynchronous instruction of activities that they already have uploaded into their Google Classroom. It'd be an opportunity for you to engage in small groups, and you would continue on with your reading block. As we look at some of our lesson resources, something I wanted y'all to consider is how students are accessing, engaging, and expressing their learning. So thinking about, does every student have access to the materials that they need in order to complete the lesson? Are you providing it via Epic or a YouTube reading video in order for them to have access to the text if they don't have the physical books at home? And then how they engage. It's already hard to engage our kiddos this day. They're used to that immediate gratification of being online and playing their games. And so it's already hard to engage. So thinking about fun ways that you can engage your students in both virtual and in person. And then how they express their learning. Your kiddos in the school might be able to write in their writing journal their responses like they typically do, and at home they could do that, but might have to snap a picture and send it to you so you can hold them accountable for that work. So thinking about different ways that they could express their learning. Next, we wanted to go over some BDL resources. Like I said, this is a technology setup video that the ILC's put together that's going to be a great resource when you get back into your classroom and figure out how you set up the technology and get this working for your kiddos. The next is the BCSD BDL website. And we'll just take a look at it real quick and talk about some of the components that it has. So this was a collaborative effort between the Center of Academics and Innovation and the Office of Technology. And it's really created to be a resource for teachers and administrators on implementing blended distance learning. This is a working document. It's definitely going to be something that's going to be continuously updated, especially as teachers like y'all create amazing things and do awesome things in your classroom. We'll add them up there for everybody else to see and share our expertise. So it does start with an overview video of how to navigate the website and all that it includes. But we're just going to kind of go over the information on this left side so you know what's available on the website in order for you to utilize it. So first it goes into a little bit of description of what is BDL and what are some of the required expectations for students and for teachers. And we went over a lot of that information today. Next is classroom setup. This is not just the physical setup of your classroom, but also the technology setup of your classroom. So what are some of the things that you need to consider before your first day with BDL learners? Next, we have communication. Communication is going to look very different this year when it comes to communicating with your students and your parents. So it has some tips and tricks and some guiding questions to get you kind of thinking about what types of communication you might need with your parents and your students. Next, there's some guiding questions on routines and structures and resources for that. Like we talked about, everybody knows you need a routine for how you sharpen a pencil, how you ask to go use the restroom. But there are going to definitely be some new things that we're going to have to create routines and structures for. For example, the emojis within the Google Meet. So this will give you some resources on starting to think about what are those additional routines and structures that we need to put in place for all learners. Next is instructional strategies. And this is broken up into 4 subcategories. We have general instructional strategies that are just best practices for BDL learners. And then we also have our subgroups of special education, ESOL, and GT. I would highly recommend if you teach any of these subgroups or if you have any of these kiddos in your classroom to make sure to kind of check out the resources there on what BDL looks like for those students. And then last we have motivation, engagement, behavior. We already talked about how it is difficult to engage students these days anyways, and so some of our tips and tricks that we normally use in the classroom, we're going to have to tweak a little bit to modify for our distance learners. So this will give you some resources for that. And then lastly, assessments. This will address both formative and summative assessments and what that could look like. The last tab that could be useful is our resources tab. This is full of wonderful technology tips and tricks. Tools that you can add or use for communication, collaboration, just general wonderful tools, and then some additional resources for our BDL teachers. So establishing norms, how are you going to address those social emotional needs for those kiddos that are at home, and how can we set up our classroom management system to where it impacts both traditional and BDL learners. So like I said, this is going to be updated as we continue to develop things out and as we see the amazing things that y'all are doing in the classroom. So this should be a resource that you check pretty frequently just to see what the new updates are for that. All right, and our last task today is our survey. So this is in your Google Classroom. It should be number 4. And this is our question and answer form for today's session. I know that there are still so many questions about what blended distance learning looks like, either in your classroom, in your school, and all of that we don't have the time to answer today. However, we definitely want to make sure we provide you the support and answers that you need, hopefully before the first day of school. So this is a form that you can fill out with your role, school location, grade level, and then it has spaces for you to ask 3 questions, as well as to know what category they fall in, whether it's technology or instruction or other. If you can kind of tier your questions to number 1 being the most urgent, that you feel like you need to answer the quickest, to 2 and 3. The Office of Technology and Center of Academics and Innovation are going to collaborate together to kind of synthesize the questions and the information and put a frequently asked question page on our Blended Distant Learning website. We're hoping to have some of those high needs questions already answered for you and uploaded by the first day of school. So as your kiddos are walking in on the first day or logging in on the first day, you'll have some of those answers to your questions. So if you don't mind taking a second and just filling this out if you have any questions now. Of course, as you start getting into your classroom and kids start coming and you start logging on with your kids, if you have additional questions, this survey will also be open for a little while in order for you to type those in as you begin the school year. So as I work on that, I want to talk to our BDL learners real quick. And I just wanted to see if any of y'all had feedback for our team in here on how it was to participate during blended distance learning instruction. If anybody would like to either type in the chat box or unmute yourself and just kind of share what it was like to participate from that lens. Anybody have any good thoughts or ideas?
Sorry.
You're good.
I enjoyed seeing the lesson, but I also feel very overwhelmed seeing the lesson.
Absolutely.
But it was nice seeing it from this side.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel like you were able to engage with the material the same way as you would if you were sitting in the classroom?
Yeah, I think so. I've never, like, we just got Chromebooks last year, right before we went out, and we didn't use them much at all in the room. So this is all very, very new.
And I think everybody shares your feeling of maybe being overwhelmed and that this is a lot to learn. Like Jen said, her and I practiced for about an hour and a half, 2 hours before we came and delivered this PD because we had to figure out the kinks of when do you mute, when do you unmute, what, all the technology pieces to it too. And I would think it's safe to say that we have a good amount of experience with technology, so I know that this is absolutely overwhelming, and we just hope that today we were able to answer some of your questions and kind of show you some of the ins and outs so you feel a little more confident going into the first day of school. And like Jen said, I would highly recommend kind of partnering up with a teacher and have them pretend to be your blended distance learner student, or if you have kiddos at home, have them log on to their Chromebook so you can kind of navigate what the in and outs of the technology pieces look like. Thank you for sharing. Somebody else also said in the chat box that they felt like it was a good experience and that they liked being able to see what the students would see at home. All right.
You teach first grade?
So I'm a coordinator of special services, so I'm not currently a teacher.
Oh,
Yes,
okay,
ma'am.
because I was just, I was just curious as to how many face-to-face and how many blended learners you have, but you're not the teacher.
No, this is not my school, no ma'am. I worked here a few years ago, but I do not know their current numbers.
Okay,
Of
because
what they're
where we are is, our school is mainly face-to-face.
Yeah.
I mean, like I have
You had 80% in
Yeah, that's wonderful.
14 in the room and 5 blended.
Yeah.
My classroom is the same. We have, so far we have a total of 18, and we only have 3 that are blended.
Mine's about half and half. Oh, really? 9 and 9, yeah.
So for y'all that only have 5 or 6 that are blended, this is more of a realistic experience of having kiddos in the classroom and then having 4 or 5 that need to log in. I think everybody's numbers are different right now, and I think honestly it's going to shift and move a lot as the school year progresses. And as parents really understand what blended distance learning is, that it is different from e-learning, and so I think those numbers are definitely going to shift a little bit, as we go throughout the school year. Renee said, great exposure. Thanks for all the technology support and ideas. All right. If y'all have any questions, I'm happy to hang around and answer any questions that y'all have. If y'all are done filling out the survey, I know y'all have tons of stuff on your to-do list. So you're more than welcome to head on out. We really appreciate y'all coming today and participating with us. And hopefully you're able to leave with a few good ideas of what this is gonna look like in your classroom.